What's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you guys for joining me again on the channel. It's been a little while since our last replay, so it's good to be back. Finally replenished my stocks, as it were, and I've got enough content, I think, for the next month and a half. So, 2v2 battle for you today. This is going to be a field battle, of course, and it is going to feature some of our new Dwarven factions. Now, worth noting that this is actually about a patch behind, I think, where I'm currently at with development for the Dwarves. So there will be some changes coming to them in the next update, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on once I have some replays on that. So just be aware that everything that you're going to see is kind of work in progress in terms of fine-tuning. But in any case, let's take a look at some of the army comps here, and then we can jump right into it. We have the Blessed Realm of Valinor being played by Panthan of Barsoom. He's got a fairly small, pretty elite army here. He's really gone heavily into the Tyrian units, which is a lot of that Noldor heavy infantry. So we've got the Sentinels of Tyrian mixed in here with the Swan Guard of Alqualanda. A great place for them to be. The Swan Guard are quite expendable, very cheap, and pretty good on their numbers. So they're the perfect unit for body blocking as you move in to kind of close into the ferocious close quarters combat that Valinor is so good at. So we've got two of those Swan Guard here, hiding no less than 2 units of the Sentinels of Tyrian. We've got some Ember Weavers of Oyalase, which is they're basically a catapult equivalent, but Valinor does things a little bit differently. So they don't have your traditional siege engines, but they do have some Maiar, and they're the only faction, I believe, who can use sort of magical spells and things like that outside of other higher beings like Sauron. Over here we have the Adepts of Tulkas, a really cool model here made for us by Castellan of Angmar. They do have a little spell of their own, as many of the Valinor Maiar units do. Theirs is mostly tuned towards disruption. It's not going to do a lot. Maybe it'll clip a model here and there, but this is largely for disruption, covering retreats, or blocking off choke points for, I think it's something to the tune of like 25 seconds or so. I will have a recursive explosion that will, again, not hurt people, but it will knock them around quite severely. And that's going to be, I believe, where the general's hanging out today. See Manwë in there with his glorious golden eyes. In behind them, we have one unit of the Sentries of Alqualanda, some light bowmen, always a nice little support unit, as many of the Teleri units are for Valinor. Got some Hearthguard here of Tyrian, and it looks like Mariners, 2 units of Mariners. Some more Hearthguard here going to be hanging out inside of a unit of Swan Guard. Actually 2 more units here of the Hearthguard. So as I said, he did really go hard on his Tyrian units, and they're very tanky, but you know, I don't see too many comps like this, so it'll be interesting to see if it's going to have the punch to really hack its way through its opponent, who is quite heavily armored. 2 Knights of Tyrian here, probably, I would say they're up there for one of the best cavalry units in the game. Definitely a tier below some of the Feanor units like the Roqueni, but really super reliable, multiple HP, heavy cavalry. Can't really go wrong with that, and there's not too many instances of it in the mod, so you're not as likely to run into analogous kinds of units that can really stand up to them in one-on-one combat. Moving on over here, we have the Kingdom of Nogrod, one of our Dwarven factions, being played by Hyperius Creon. He's brought the Forge Fire of Zirak, and as you probably guessed here, the Nogrod faction is a little bit fond of chariots. So it's got the Forge Fire of Zirak, which is essentially a flame pike weapon, analogous to a lot of the other Angband and Tol Gaurhoth units, but they are very, very quick, but very, very fragile. They're not extremely expensive, and against the right targets, they can be absolutely devastating, but it's one of those units that you can take it, or kind of leave it, and if you take it, well, you're not necessarily dumping a ton of resources and expecting it to kind of win the game for you, but if it does well, then it'll pay for itself extremely quickly. Over here we have the Engineers of Nogrod, and it's worth noting that there are some specialties between these chariots. The Forge Fire of Zirak in close quarters combat are basically weak to everything. Everyone will kill them, even archers can kill them over time. The Engineers of Nogrod, a little bit more medium armor tier, so a little bit better defense against missiles, but they are very good against other cavalry units, but they don't really have a ton of mass. They don't have any sort of armor-piercing charge or really a lot of damage otherwise. outside of, you know, attacking cavalry, because they do have some significant bonuses there. But otherwise, it's kind of an anemic unit to use in close quarters, unless maybe you can get some really nice rear or flank charges, or even just inundate an enemy line, and maybe bypass some of their melee defenses against more lightly armored troops. Then you could expect to see the Engineers of Nogrod perform well in CQB against infantry. But one of the more interesting traits is that they actually have a Scorpion mounted on the back of this. So it's a lot less range than your average Scorpion, so it's a little bit more close up. They do have to kind of expose themselves to a lot of counterfire in order to actually use it, but it can be very, very devastating, especially if this is a unit that manages to get in behind you. That can be very scary indeed. I've got some Beast Hunters here of Nogrod, very much a bread and butter unit for the Kingdom of Nogrod. They basically do damage to almost everything, with really, really high damage, obviously quite low on the missile defense. They're having no shield and only medium armor, but they are also quite good at hunting down monsters. So when I say bread and butter, I mean it's very polyvalent. It can fill a whole bunch of different roles. You can use it as DPS, you can use it as a cavalry screen, an anti-monster hunter. There's a lot of things that you can do with it, and they are a little bit priced accordingly. And that is kind of important for Nogrod, because their more expensive specialized units are pretty damn expensive. So it's looking like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of those Beast Hunters here. Yeah, not surprised to see it at all. Over here we have the heaviest of the Chariot units. For Nogrod, we've got the Siege Breakers of Tumunzahar, and pretty unique as far as Chariot units go. They do have the minor blasting charges. There's not enough of them, and they don't have enough ammo to really deal a ton of significant damage that way. But it is really useful for a heavy cavalry unit that loves to get into broken lines, or it likes to penetrate formations to get at some of the softer units. It can be used to create a lot of mayhem and allow these chariots to slip through into places that maybe you wouldn't expect them to be able to. And that being said, when they do mount that ferocious charge, it is, I believe, armor piercing, and it has a lot of damage behind it. So this is a unit that can pay off really mightily for you, but it does have some significant disadvantages, especially against cavalry. It's huge. It's like a minus 15 penalty against cavalry, and as all Dwarven units do, they do suffer when you bring them into the woods as well. So in the woods against cavalry, this is a unit that can fall away very quickly, despite its obviously very heavily armored appearance. But if you're using it well and you're supporting it, then this is absolutely a game-winning unit for sure. Out in front here, we have some Stonehewers of Tumunzahar. These are going to be the two-handed maces, and it doesn't look like they have their armor upgrade today, which means that they're going to be capped at 9 armor, as many of the high tiers and really just the roster generally outside the bodyguards for Nogrod tend to be. But this is a ferocious damaging unit. It's got a ton of DPS, and it's got armor piercing to boot. There's almost nothing that this can not be strong against, but it does have some pretty significant disadvantages, that lower armor being one, especially without the armor upgrade, no shields, and of course the lower numbers here, only 100. This unit can make combat ineffective quite quickly. Looks like we actually have 7 units here of the Beast Hunters, missed a couple of them. They make up a lot of the numbers here for Nogrod, which generally they tend to lack in non-Beast Hunter heavy compositions. Not that one is better than the other, but certainly there are places for both. 2 units here of the Miners of Nogrod, an excellent unit to support the Beast Hunters. They can cause all kinds of chaos and actually do a pretty decent amount of damage against almost anything that they throw at. And in behind them, we've got the Warlords of Tumunzahar, and that's going to be the General's Bodyguard for Hyperius Creon today. And this is like a brutal 1-2 punch, followed by the knockout blow of the Warlords here. So really scary. Some chariots out here supporting them as well. So out on the wings, you've got chariots on either side. You've got the scary heavy ones kind of in the middle, looking for opportunities. Very much a rush composition, as I'm sure you've noticed. So we're going to go ahead and move on over to the red team's army comps, and then we can jump into the battle itself. And so, opposite Nogrod, we've got the Avari today, being played by Captain Gervais. This is going to be a tough fight for the Avari. but you know, they certainly do have a lot of tools, especially for dealing with those chariots, and a lot of fairly decent missile units that could be used to maybe thin out the front lines for sure. So they've got the Thorncasters, they've got Rangers, they've got a lot of the tools I think necessary to deal with Nogrod, but those fast-moving chariots are certainly going to be a problem for a faction with no cavalry. So let's go ahead and see what Captain Gervais has brought to kind of round off some of those significant weaknesses. We've got the Thorned Ancients here, probably actually 2 units of them. Really strong shock troops, honestly, against especially low defense units. These guys are absolute beasts. They can get hundreds upon hundreds of kills throughout the course of the game, and they've got enough mass to just mess things up, and there's not a ton of like AP, for example, outside of the two-handed macemen for Nogrod. So these heavily armored Thorned Ancients can be, well, a thorn in their side, you might say. So we'll see how they're able to deal with that today. Grandfather of the Deepwood Hearth. This is a living artillery piece, so he's going to be able to pop off some nice shots here as they move in, and he might even be able to clip a few of the chariots as they move in as well. So we've got some Thorncasters here, absolutely an essential unit, I would say, in this matchup. They've got a lot of potential for thinning crowds, and the AP and the extra damage that these harassment javelins get is going to be completely devastating, especially against Beast Hunter heavy compositions, if they are able to leverage a little bit of like time and use some of the more expendable units to give them the space that they need to get that damage off. So some really important units here, kind of at the core of Rex's army. We've got some Bow Wards here as well. Looks like they're going to be the expendable front line, and they're going to have a very bad time against those Beast Hunters. But really, it's just going to be about buying time for some of those scarier units here, the Thorncasters especially, to hopefully thin out the horde. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of the Bow Wards, kind of in a little bit of a checkerboard formation here, probably to open up some more spaces in the line for the Thorncasters to continuously pelt the dwarves as they smash into those lightly armored Bow Wards. So it looks like 1, 2 units there of the Thorncasters. Got some shades of the Guarded Path as well, and this is looking like a pretty small Avari army. So I'm willing to put some money that there's some more expensive elite units that are kind of hiding in like the 3rd and the 4th line here, waiting for the opportunity to strike, because this looks very, very small. I would guess there's between maybe 3 to 4 additional units that are hiding out here, plus potentially some other archers and things like that. So we'll see what pops out of the woodwork there for the Avari. Pardon me, I'm going to cough now. Moving on over to the Kingdom of Belegost, who is going to be opposite. Who is he opposite again? Valinor, of course. This is going to be really interesting. It's very much the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. And they're going to be played today by Caden of Northonion. So really cool to see dwarves on either side of the field here, and they've got some pretty unique traits about them. Brotherhood of the Silver Hammer is going to be one of their 2 legendary companies. I think they are the only faction currently that, especially in multiplayer, can bring multiple legendary companies. That is to say, some legendary companies are detachments, but this is like 2 separate units of a different legendary company with its own utility and things like that. So I don't know, because they don't currently have some armor upgrade models implemented, but they could have their armor upgrades, which does allow them to upgrade from medium into heavy. And of course, they've got those big, ugly maces there, which is really, really nice for hacking apart some heavily armored foes, such as a lot of the Tyrian units across the way there. So we'll see. We'll see if that's able to be leveraged to significant effect against Panthan's army. We've got another AP unit here, Dragon Slayers of Azagal. This is going to be a bodyguard unit. I think yes, they are considered medium infantry. But they do have really strong damage, and they are also armor piercing. They're a little bit different. They're not quite a 2-handed axe, I think, as their model would suggest. We actually used the halberd weapon template for these guys, and while they don't have a spear wall, they do have a lot of the bonuses, especially against cavalry. Oops, sorry, that's my speaker talking. They do have a lot of bonuses against, say, cavalry and things like that. That can be really, really useful in a number of different matchups, especially because Belegost pretty much across the board takes a -2 penalty against all kinds of cavalry on basically everything that they have that isn't a spear or a polearm. So yeah, that's significant. Back here we have a couple units of the Iron Guardsmen of Belegost. They have changed quite mightily from their current iteration on live. They are still really good heavy infantry. They have gone down a lot in damage and their charge bonus as well, but I believe their defense has increased, and they've also gained a not super powered throwing axe. It doesn't have quite the same amount of damage as dedicated axe throwers, but they do have a couple of throwing axes that each model can throw, which is pretty nice. It really does kind of feed into Belegost being a faction that wins its battles through attrition, through outlasting things with their armor, and just little extras like those throwing axes, like all of their artillery pieces and their various missile units as well. That's where a lot of the damage on Belegost is actually going to come from, is their missiles. And they're experts at pinning people down, especially with the Ember Guard of Gabalgathol. They do have a stagger associated with their projectiles, so yeah, there's a lot of things that Belegost can do to kind of pin people in place while their real damage dealers do their best from range. Moving on here, I've got a couple units of Iron Halberdiers, 1, 2, 3 units of them. They might have some armor upgrades as well. Out in front, we've got Arbalists of Belegost, still detachments, so you are going to have like less of them, but you are able to kind of split your fire a little bit more imaginatively, and you're able to kind of react to situations and bring the firepower to bear that needs to be. So it looks like we're going to have 3 units of that detachment here. Hammer of Mahal, which is this currently placeholder ballista piece, and I'm trying to remember its projectiles off the top of my head. I think it focuses a little bit more on blowing up other artillery, dealing light damage to infantry, and it can also be pretty strong, I think, against like siege and walls and things like that. So not your typical kind of artillery piece. A lot of Belegost's stuff really just do different things. And they're not always just like big upfront damage the way a lot of other artillery is. But these can certainly do some, and they are very, very annoying and disruptive. And probably the most powerful thing of all is that their projectile has the ability to set other things on fire. So even if they don't kill something like a ballista or a catapult or a siege tower, whatever it happens to be, they can still light it on fire and it will kill itself over time. So really strong anti-siege and just sort of anti-camping weapon. And I think they have some other siege weapons here as well. So we've got a flame tower, crewed by the Champions of the Forge. I'm sure you guys will recognize this model as it is currently on live. This is the old Dragon Slayers of Azagal model, but now they just do damage as regular axemen. But they also crew the Flame Tower, which is pretty well the same as its current iteration. It's really tooled like basically all flame weapons, without any exception, I think. It's really best at cutting apart lightly armored units or medium infantry who don't have a shield, things like that. And it does have to get a little bit close, so you're probably not going to be able to use up its entire ammunition throughout the course of a game. Maybe you will, maybe you'll get lucky, but against players that is going to be a pretty difficult prospect. And some Iron Guardsmen out front of them, and they're going to be sort of holding down the line, giving a little bit of a buffer here for the Flame Tower, which can in fact shoot over friendly units. 2 units here of the Ember Guard of Gabalgathol, as I did mention earlier. They are a crossbow, but they do have some disruption associated with them. And they can, against a single unit, they can lock it down until basically all of their ammunition is pretty much gone. Its damage will probably decrease a little bit because that utility is so strong, and it does synergize really nicely with the other crossbow units. But rest assured, this will always be a very irritating unit. I believe it also has a axe for close combat, so they are able to kind of deal a little bit of damage back after melee has been joined. 2 units here of the Horde Keepers of Gabalgathol. They will be getting a little bit of a decrease to their survivability overall, but this is very much the bulwark unit. This is like the kind of last stand. If they get through the Horde Keepers, then they're going to get through everything, and it's basically a lost game at that point. This is a unit that when put into Shield Wall is almost almost invincible unless you're able to flank it, hit it with artillery or other missiles and things like that. But when it comes to CQB, super survivable. There are very few units that can overcome them basically in a direct confrontation from the front, and it's not because they do a ton of damage, they just simply outlast people. So we've got 1, 2, and I think maybe 3 units there in total of the Horde Keepers of Gabble Gathel, and that should be it for the army here. I don't really think that they've got too much that they can hide. Oh yeah, one other note here is that these crews, the Hammer of Mahal crews, very strong. They will be dropping in size somewhat over the course of the next couple of patches. So Valinor here, really gonna take to it right off the bat. Smashing into these poor guys, but again, Belegost is going to do a lot of damage over time, so people who are getting hit by this, a lot of them will be able to get back up. And now that flame tower, pretty nicely guarded. Looks like it was actually brought in front of the Iron Guardsmen, which not sure how I feel about that. Iron Guardsmen are going to be able to open up with that salvo, and you can see, oof, yeah, just destruction opening up here upon Valinor. Now, it's not going to buy them necessarily a ton of time, especially once they get in there, but it does give them those extra few seconds to maybe get off a volley or two. Now, Valinor is going to basically crash into the front of these dwarven lines here. I'm going to go ahead and slow it down a little bit because things are actually are heating up on the other side as well. And those second and third lines, especially those crossbowmen, beginning to open up on this Valinor contingent, and they're really taking it on the chin, but not as devastating as all of the fireworks may imply. Again, Belegost is one of those factions that is going to do their damage over time. So I'm wondering what the purpose here of kind of the Caden had in bringing this out in front of the Axemen. I would definitely have held them behind it and given the Axemen a chance to disrupt this approach, because again, throwing axes, the reason they were given it is because they have a little bit higher mass, so they will knock people off their feet. So it's a really strong synergy, but it looks like Caden's maybe given that up for the time being. But that being said, there's a big pocket of dwarven firepower, and it is raining down hell and destruction upon Panthen Barsoom as he moves forward here. So we're going to pop on over to the other side. Looks like Caden's kind of maybe looking to take some pot shots over here at Nogrod as they begin to advance against the Avari. Bow Wards doing their best. The First Refusers out here hanging out. I knew we were going to see some more units. First Refusers, potentially a very scary unit. They do put a damage over time on the ground around where their missile hits, and it will instantly kill units who stay in it for too long. Over here, oh, destruction. Those poor Bow Wards really taking it on the chin from those miners. Now, it looks a lot more devastating than it is. A lot of these guys will get up, but it does deal some pretty serious damage. Rangers of the Hidden Path now coming out of their hiding place. They were looking in the shadows before, but no more. Miners of Nogrod not going to have a good time with that if they start to target them down. Warlords of Tumunzahar up here in front with the Forge Fire of Zirak. Looks like there's some engineers in behind them as well. Oh, some nasty javelin volleys really cutting apart these Forge Fire. And I don't know if they're going to have an opportunity here to shoot anything because they do need a clear line of sight. Oof, yeah, the artillery from behind, though, from those chariots, really brutal here, thinning out those Bow Wards quite nicely, although they are at least kind of body blocking a bit for the Rangers, allowing them more time to deal with that Forge Fire. I'm sure they'd love to get a piece of the Siege Breaker, though. Looks like both of the Thorned Ancients here have gone against the Siege Breaker, and there are some Beast Hunters in here as well. And Beast Hunters actually have enough damage to be able to hack through the quite formidable armor rating of the Thorned Ancients. Now, they will take some damage in return. You can see they've probably lost about 30 or so models. But with that AP charge as well, these Thorned Ancients getting just really mulched apart by this very strong contingent of Dwarven shock units. Back here, we got some Stone Hewers. Looks like they were probably trying to get a piece of the Grandfather, who I have no doubt was raining down destruction upon the flanks of the Dwarven units as they advance. But Stone Hewers now kind of out in the open, and that's going to give the Thorncasters a very tempting target indeed. And they will be able to kill this unit in fairly short order. Over here, it looks like a little bit of lost micro on some of these Stone Hewers, or perhaps Hyperius isn't entirely sure where best to deploy them. Warlords of Tumunzahar front and center, though, hacking their way to the front lines. And the Avari are really kind of suffering here If these Rangers can get off a few good volleys against these chariots here, oh, that would be absolutely devastating. It looks like they're going to be disrupted quite heavily, though, by blasting charges tossed from the back of those chariots. And now a brutal rear charge here. I would expect these battle wards to basically evaporate here. So they're going to go from 132 down to, ooh, I wonder, 125. Yeah, it does. It does happen very, very quickly. That's going to be an ugly morale shock for them. Thorncasters basically getting the best charge you could ever hope to have for a chariot unit, and I would expect these Swordcasters to just be completely mutilated by the end of this. Some of them are going to be able to get back up. You can see a decent amount of them have certainly been put down for good. The Rangers of the Hidden Path getting smushed in there as well. Looks like over here some of these Rangers are not having a great time as well. Over in the back, it seems that the Rangers have managed to destroy one of the medium chariots. The other one on the other side is quite low as well. So the attrition is starting to take something of a toll here on Nogrod, but we'll be back in just a few minutes here to see what's going to happen. So some of the Swan Guard just tying up the Hammer of Mahal crew. They're definitely going to lose that fight, but it will keep that artillery piece from perhaps shooting in support of his Nogrod ally on the other side. Iron Guardsmen of Belegost, looks like they're beating a pretty hasty retreat here. Not too sure what managed to deal the damage. And Caden very much kind of circling the wagons here, if you look. Swan Guard able to kind of outflank this group of Horde Keepers, but they're going to be very much at home, and it looks like a lot of the Valinor frontal assault has been very much blunted. So I would expect the Adepts to be able to kind of hack their way through this over time, but they will take a decent amount of damage through attrition, and it's going to take ages with 133 of them. Meanwhile, over here, Sentinels of Tyrion and their Swan Guard retinue not going to have a good time trying to get through this, and there's still a basically full health unit of them over here as well. Now, these Sentinels of Tyrion are going to do their best, but they are going to be fighting a little bit uphill here from the looks of things. And it looks like, ooh, the Ember Weavers managed to get... I have no idea what they are doing so far in here, but I'm curious what they actually managed to hit, if anything. And it looks like Pantheon doing a really good job here of kind of circumventing some of the Dwarven defenses. Looks like he's managed to get into some of the Arbalists, which is a really big deal. There's some support from those light archers as well. These Hearthguard of Tyrion just gonna shrug that off. But some of these Dwarven units, especially the Arbalists, don't have quite as high armor as the rank and file infantry, so that will be some pretty noticeable damage for them there for sure. Iron Arbalist just firing into the flank of these Hearthguard, but perhaps a little bit too close. Hammer of Mahal out here, and these are units that are basically just going to fight each other forever. Like, I would be surprised if this is still going on once this game has ended. Over in the back here, still have some good reserves. We've got some, well, a depleted unit of Iron Guardsmen, but we do, of course, have the Dragon Slayer. And I think they were used to pretty good effect so far. Based on the bodies on the ground, I think they've managed to delete an entire unit of Knights of Tyrion. So a little bit of, a lot actually, of back and forth here. The Flame Tower units, they might be able to beat these guys. But yeah, some wins, some losses on kind of either side. It looks like the Iron Guardsmen getting targeted by the Knights of Tyrion. Oh, so the second unit is still here. It's just heavily mauled. And they're going to manage to get actually a rear charge there. So that's going to do a lot more damage. Supporting unit there of Iron Guardsmen going to toss those throwing axes at them. And will actually hurt a decent amount. Wouldn't be too surprised to see more of these guys now begin to fall. Knights of Tyrion going to get a frontal charge, but honestly, with the additional defense and the melee defense, it's not going to do too much to those Iron Guardsmen. They'll absorb that fairly easily, and the third unit here is able to just kind of pelt these guys now as they retreat, which is going to be really nice here in terms of trading for Caden. So yeah, very much hanging in the balance a little bit. I would say perhaps even a little bit Dwarven favored. Moving on over here, the Avari are really in a bad spot. It looks like the Dwarves of Nogrod have managed to shatter that front line, now getting into some of those more, as I said, very important units here. Thorncasters, they are, however, being supported by what remains of these Rangers, and I think they will be able to see off these Beast Hunters, but, you know, at what cost, right? Still a lot of Miners here, more Beast Hunters to come. Some of the Battle Wards hanging on for dear life, fighting those Miners of Nogrod. And then over here, it seems like that other unit of Thorncasters has just been completely isolated. A little bit of a wet noodle fight here between the Grandfather and the Siegebreakers. The Grandfather's not exactly the best at dueling other elephants because he does lack armor piercing, whereas Siegebreakers have it, but Siegebreakers have such big penalties against all cavalry, and that includes elephants like the Grandfather. And it looks like he actually managed to drag one of those down to their deaths. So Apirius going to pull that out, and it seems like the rest of his chariots have pretty well been destroyed, I think. So there's some Beast Hunters over here still slogging it out with the Thorned Ancients. And it seems like maybe Rex is going to try and cut his losses and get out of there if he can. And maybe bring some of these Thorned Ancients to bear elsewhere. So that Grandfather now, it's got a little bit of space to actually do some damage. It is going to take a shot. Maybe it'll get a second one here. Let's see if that actually manages to hit anybody. Oh, and it does. Now, they're not all dead. I'm sure many dwarf lovers out there were like, oh my god, that's ridiculous. Most of them will get up again. It has a much higher area for its knockback than it does for the actual damage dealt. But that being said, nice little shot there, and it's going to free up this small, quite reduced blob of dwarven troops to go and maybe finish the fight elsewhere. So it seems like things are kind of wrapping up here a little bit. Rangers of the Hidden Path doing as much as they possibly can. The Beast Hunters versus the Rangers, I would probably give that to the Beast Hunters, but they do have a lot of survivability. I think they've got like 20 or something melee defense. So when it comes to a straight slog, it's not just going to be, you know, in and out real quick and then you move on down the road. It will take some time for sure. And these Rangers of the Hidden Path now going to be chased off by the miners. I doubt that they'll be able to catch them since these light infantry and elves especially are quite fast, much faster than these miners. Even with the speed bonus there from that charge animation, they're really kind of struggling here, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do it. So this might be the only piece of his army that he's able to actually save here, and maybe that's a bit of a foregone conclusion. There are, of course, some Knights of Tyrion out and about, prowling around, and I'm sure they'd love to gobble up those Rangers. So we'll see if Rex manages to salvage anything from this. Looks like some of the Thorncasters will kind of get away, but you know what? I think that they're going to fall prey to those Knights of Tyrion there. Where's the Rangers of the Hidden Path? Oh, yeah, they might just get caught here by those endlessly charging miners. Looks like they'll maybe get one guy. That might be enough to slow them down. Yeah, I think they're going to start the stop there. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a moment. The dwarves sort of holding their own here, it seems, at least in parts. The Hammer of Mahal crew successfully repelling that little delaying action. And it looks like there's more dwarven infantry on this side that are being mustered to kind of deal with Valinor. And out here on the front, attacking into the front of Halberdiers. I mean, the Sentinels of Tyrion do have Relentless, and damaging units with Relentless are actually pretty decent at going into the front of Phalanx units, just because they can't really be staggered and knocked back, which is one of the big things that polearms do. That being said, I think that the Valinor assault has kind of been blunted on the front lines. This is really just looking like a holding action, just trying to keep the dwarves busy. You can see more and more units. Bit of a desperation play here, maybe. Centers of Alcalander being thrown into the front of the Iron Halberdiers. Halberdiers are going to love that fight all day, every day. Some Mariners have managed to get in behind them, so maybe this is going to be a bit of a 1-2 punch here. Try and thin out that Phalanx with some cheap units. Hearthguard of Tyrion smacking away at the Hammer of Mahal. Like I said, they'll be doing that until the end of days. Some point-blank volleys here, and you can see that kind of stun. It is a little bit of a recursive stun, very similar to the flash bombs, and it has, I think, an identical duration. So a few seconds there, more than enough, that if they were at range, they'd be already loading their next volley. But it seems like, kind of in the back, Valinor has managed to shunt a whole bunch of pretty strong, sticky units into the Dwarven underbelly. And so they're not going to kill them, I think, easily over time, but yeah, this is going to be quite difficult for them to deal with, and it does, of course, complicate things as Nogrod is now moving across the field, and their ally has basically been completely destroyed. So it's kind of the dwarves standing alone at this point. Some Iron Halberdiers just kind of sitting out here, smacking some Swan Guard apart. Adepts, I don't think I've lost anybody yet, but they are taking their time, definitely cutting their way through the Horde Keepers. The Swan Guard of Alcalonde would never, ever be able to do this without help from somebody else. So I wonder, you know, what kind of help they ended up getting there. Horde Keepers over on this side, kind of doing okay. Maybe things are unraveling for the Dwarves here. They do still have a strong pocket of missile units, which, as I said, is really a lot of their like killing power. That's still kind of here, mostly untouched. Oh, Siege Breakers managed. Looks like the Dragon Slayers actually managed to rout off the Siege Breakers. I assume they took that fight under the impression that they'd be able to just kind of hack their way through an infantry bodyguard and maybe deal a lot of damage really quickly. But it's looking like no, and they're actually going to flee through some of their own troops. They need to knock the Tyrian Noldor over, and then they're going to make their great escape through the enemy lines here. I don't think anyone's actually going to get killed from that, but it is certainly pretty funny. Over here, Dragon Slayers on damage control. Iron Guardsmen have kind of shifted out of position here, and they're going to open up a nice little straight path straight to the heart of the Belegost army, and these Iron Arbalists are going to feel the wrath of those Knights of Tyrian. They're going to start to hack their way through there, while some Mariners of Alcalonde move in. Now, I would expect the Arbalists to be able to deal with this light infantry in most cases, but they just took, I think, about half their number in one charge from the 13 remaining Knights of Tyrian. And it looks like maybe... Oh, no cheeky charges? All right, then. Another big charge here, I think, from those Knights of Tyrian, who are doing just fine, but with that smash, that Hulk smash from the Knights of Tyrian, that's going to turn this fight on its head. And look at them fall. Brutal damage. Just the absolute difference between, you know, charging this unit from the rear, whereas when they smashed into them from the front earlier, maybe they killed a couple of models. And that's going to give Nogrod the impetus I think that they need to smash through what remains of the Belegost reserve. So if we look at that there, it's still relatively close, about a 5% or so difference, and there's still plays to make. Like, Caden is still in the game, but he's running out of things that can deal with these Knights of Tyrian, who've got to hand it to Pantha, and he's been controlling them very well, picking good fights, and even supporting his ally. And I think that that's going to be what wins this game here, because Belegost unmolested. With a Valinor who's kind of got no more gas in the tank, this would be a slam dunk win for them for sure. So Knights of Tyrian very greatly contributing to the overall war effort here. Now these Iron Guardsmen who were at like 130 something, or maybe 150 just a moment ago, now down to less than 100. So big deal there. Hammer of Mahal looks like they're now being brought forward to try and staunch some of the bleeding if possible, but they are being delayed by the Miners of Nogrod. Not going to do a ton of damage to them, of course. You will see a few models fall now and again, but this is really just, it's already a very slow unit, and then when they have to stop and reform after getting bounced around by those blasting charges, yeah, this is going to stop them from being able to get into the mix in the center here, where they can be most useful. Meanwhile, ooh, what do you know? The Avari still kind of in the game. Nice little shots here into what I would assume would be the Adepts of Tulkas, who have gone from 33 to 24 in relatively short order, thanks to those deadly javelins. Certainly one of the more damaging units, especially at range, from the Avari, but it looks like they have kind of whistled their last tune here. They're now out of ammunition, and they're just going to have to be thrown into melee somewhere, hopefully somewhere impactful. I'd probably throw them in to the back of the Swan Guard. I think that they'd be able to do lots of damage there, whereas like the Adepts in close quarters will certainly cleave them in twain. But that's entirely up to Rex. I'm sure he has an idea of what he wants to do with them. Swan Guard here, now moving in to maybe reinforce another Swan Guard unit, or maybe they've just kind of pulled out there after taking horrendous casualties. That's going to give the Iron Halberdiers here an opportunity to turn around and head straight for these Hearthguard Tyrian, who, it has to be said, they've been in the thick of it pretty well for the entire game. They've weathered, you know, volleys of crossbows and things like that, and they've come out of it pretty decently. Kind of starting to maybe lose some more numbers here. I think that second HP is gone, so maybe we'll start to see them crumble away here. But I think the Dwarves are in a lot of trouble. Ember Guard, they are relatively competent, but not enough to hack their way through multiple HP heavy infantry in any sort of short order. Mariners of Alcalonde here, it says victory is certain, but you know what? That's really down to the Hearthguard there. They are kind of doubling up on these guys, and I would expect the these spearmen to, or the Marines rather, to lose pretty handily. A very healthy, well, relatively healthy unit anyway, of Iron Halberdiers of Belegost moving in over here to try and blunt what remains of the Nogrod offensive, and you gotta hand it to Caden. He's doing well. He's managed to bring the Hammer of Mahal forward. Now he's gonna pin them in place, and the Iron Halberdiers slowly moving their way in. And what remains of the proud forces of Belegost, who really gave the Avari such a good thrashing, now about to be pinned there between the hammer and the anvil. This is interesting. So I didn't quite realize that the Avari still had things left. So a few Thorned Ancients, and looks like the Grandfather is up here as well, being intercepted on his way back. He could be extremely useful in trying to turn things here against Valinor. They don't really have a lot of strong anti-elephant units. They certainly have the Sentinels of Tyrion, but not a lot of AP there, right? And they've kind of taken a bit of a beating throughout the course of the game. So I think the Grandfather would certainly have its way with them if they were able to get in there. Rex just trying to maybe cycle charge, kill a couple of these models. Thorned Ancients also here, but they are basically infantry, so there's a chance that cavalry such as this could just insta-give them if they get a good enough charge off. So this is, yeah, I don't know if these guys are going to be able to really join the main fight. Panthan doing an excellent job here. Some good situational awareness at, zoning out any potential problems. He certainly delayed them long enough that... Nogrod doing their best, running into the Iron Guardsman. Some support here now from Valinor. Yeah, I think Nogrod... I think this is kind of their last gasp, certainly, unless they get some additional support, but they've done beautifully in this game already for their team. But, yeah, some really heavy and relatively healthy units over here. Warlords of Tumanzahar. I wonder how well they're going to do against the Iron Halberdiers. I don't know if they're relentless or not. I don't believe that they are. So the Iron Halberdiers, even if they lose, they will be able to exact a terrible toll. Cavalry, again, being used to screen these guys out. Panthan really just on top of it today, absolutely playing like he's on fire. Meanwhile, over here, the Dwarves slowly being ground down, even with the support from the Halberdiers here in this partial surround. Hearthguard of Tyrion managing to stand their ground now. The Adepts of Toolcasts have managed to get in behind the Halberdiers here, and I think this might be kind of the end for them. Nice big charge into the rear of these Iron Halberdiers, who are already kind of hanging on by a thread. Already shaken, very tired, and those penalties are beginning to accrue, and I think we're going to reach a bit of a breaking point here for the Dwarves, at least over on this side. So the medium, the Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer have been brought forward now with the Hammer of Mahal, and they're going to have no problem, I think, hanking through the Hearthguard of Tyrion. So there's like a couple little pockets here where Caden's Belegost units are doing very well. And then there's like this, which is kind of like the main fight. And I suppose there's still this going on over here as well. These two spearmen basically fighting each other forever. Horde Keepers on this side. Looks like Rex has managed to slip in some Thorned Ancients, and you know what? A rear charge for them might actually be pretty good against the Swan Guard there, and the Grandfathers here as well. Being relentlessly pursued, though, by the Knights of Tyrion. I would just honestly throw them in here and throw them in on this side. It's not as easy for the Knights to get around, and even if they do want to kind of charge in there, they are still facing Spearmen. I think that's kind of the play here. Yeah, just try and smash in, maybe free up a little bit of what remains of Caden's front line, but I think this is unraveling relatively quickly. That being said, only a few % difference, but that's probably down to the amount of Tyrion units here that Panthan has. It's a very small, very elite army, as I said at the beginning. He's still got a lot of those elites in a pretty healthy condition. All the Rangers have already been very, very slippery, managing to get into the back of these Mariners here, hopefully freeing up some of the Ember Guard. Maybe if he could just pull a unit out, he can even shoot at some of these Knights of Tyrion and bring them down pretty quickly. They are still crossbows, so they do have that decent damage pool, and it is armor piercing, of course. Swan Guard and the Grandfather over here. Grandfather kind of just hanging around, but I think he's going to go in there and maybe go after the Swan Guard. Try and go for, small victories. Maybe they'll add up to a big one. Oh, more of those cavalry coming in. Swan Guard are actually standing up to it pretty decently. Oh, never mind. Big blob of them just died, and I think this might be enough to maybe rout them off here. Especially as these guys cycle out and maybe go for another charge. Yeah, you're going to see that that morale shift there, and not in a good way, and off go the Swan Guard. So a little bit of a reprieve here from Caden, or for Caden. Does have a little bit of Avari support that he can rely on. Those Rangers still kind of leering about. But based on the tools here, even though the percentages are relatively close, based on the tools, I think that this is a blue team victory for sure. Let's go ahead, kick it up to full speed now. Horde Keepers, both units of them, what remains anyway, able to finally disentangle themselves. Sentinels of Tyrion going in here. They're going to give these Horde Keepers an opinion on what they think of that, and they're going to be able to just hack those guys apart pretty quickly. That being said, some dwarves have managed to make it in. These Swan Guard, I don't think are going to last very long once the Grandfather gets a hold of them. Yeah, they're just one big morale shock away, I think, from fleeing from this battle utterly. They are still kind of holding on, which is surprising. Maybe because of the presence of the general, probably that indeed. And now those Adepts of Toolcost are going to be in there, and that's actually pretty scary for the Grandfather. It's not somewhere I think that he really wants to stay, and Rex probably knows it. So it looks like some breaking here. These Halberdiers, I don't think they're going to be able to stand for too much longer. Amber Guard now beginning to fall away as well. Warlords of Tumunzahar managing to... I can't remember what they started with. I think it was maybe like 50, so they actually did pretty well. That cavalry smashing in to the Belegost Halberdiers, who are still kind of holding on by a bit of a thread. Some support from the Avari as well, going to help see that cavalry off, but there's really nothing that they have left that can stop them. More Valinor heavy hitters rounding on this area of the battlefield, trying to free up the Warlords. Hammer of Mahal still doing well. Stonehewer is basically dead, as are the Dragon Slayers of Azagal. And it's a bloody fight on both sides. Like, Nogrod did really well against the Avari. They got quite severely mauled, but you gotta hand it to Caden. Like, the odds were definitely stacked against him, and he's kind of held it together here, thanks to the resilience of those Dwarves of Belegost. And this is like the best hope I think they have for victory over here. This is where everything is gonna just collapse in. Try and get rid of these Hearthguard of Tyrion. I don't think they're gonna be able to do that when a general bodyguard arrives on scene, and that's gonna help hearten these guys. And yeah, it's basically game over. Once the Grandfather, I think, goes down here, which probably won't take that long. I don't think Rex wants to stay in there too long. He is actually going to manage to get out of there. But really, how long can the Grandfather last at this point? Nice little cheeky charge here. How much is it actually going to do? Hearthguard going to redouble their efforts back up to steady. These Macemen doing their best. Oof, another big charge here from that Cav. So valuable this game. There wasn't really anything that the opposite side had that could just kind of deal with them, confront them on relatively equal terms. Down goes the Grandfather, by the way, probably dragged down by the Adepts of Toolcost. Now, there is another legendary company for Belegost. It is sort of like a hybrid Lancer melee cavalry unit, and might have been, I think, the play here. If he suspected at all that Pantheon would be going quite heavy into the cavalry, which a lot of Valinor players tend to do, so that'd be a fair assumption. But yeah, I think that maybe bringing that other legendary company would have been the play here for sure. But nonetheless, Caden still resilient here, defiant to the end, managing to surround a big section here of these Valinor troops. And oof, a lot of their spearmen, but you need to be able to stay on top of it. You can't just let your spearmen get charged from the rear and just trust to the fact that they're spearmen, that, you know, cavalry will never want to go anywhere near them. Yeah, you need to be on top of that for sure. Rangers of the Hidden Path trying to fend off this cavalry here, and be interested to see who can pull this off, because technically these guys have daggers, so they are armor piercing. It's just not a lot of damage. But when they do make it in, it can certainly shave an HP off. No, I don't think so. 2 of the 5 went down, and that cavalry's going to be able to skirt away. Another beautiful cycle charge there. And I think that's basically all she wrote for the poor Rangers here. Maybe they'll manage to take down one model. That would be a victory in and of itself. No, I don't think so. I think they're going to be able to just cut them all apart. And the Hammer of Mahal, really going to be the last man standing here, which is kind of unsurprising. Well, there are... Yeah, another Hammer of Mahal unit, of course. How many of these warlords are left? Wow, they are just so resilient. Especially with I think they can get armor upgrade, so especially with an armor upgrade, it's actually worth it to try and invest in protecting your more expensive, powerful units like this, and obviously you can see the results here for sure. It's going to be a matter of time before they manage to take them down. Is that the very last ranger? Oh yeah, fighting to the end. You got to hand it to him. His general's dead. Literally, the whole army is gone. He's just not giving up. And bam, decapitated by that Knight of Tyrion. Go ahead and kick it up, I think, to 6 times here, while the dwarves are slowly ground down. 96 to 91, though. Very, very nicely played by the red team here. It was fairly close. I don't think there was too many moments throughout the course of the game where the red team was really like in a commanding position, but percentage-wise, yeah, they really managed to hold it together and made the blue team really work for their victory. So nicely done on their end. Last remnants of the Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer falling here. Hammer of Mahal doing their best. Man, these Tyrion units. I don't see too many Valinor compositions like this because of like there's lots of things in the game that can like deal with the heavy armor. A lot of say javelins and stuff like that. And crossbows can do it over time, but like javelins are really the big one. And Belegost does have a decent amount of crossbows, so I was surprised to see that the Hearthguard of Tyrion were just able to kind of tank and weather everything that came their way. Really, really impressive showing here. Very much the epitome, I guess, of kind of what Valinor is as a faction. These very small elite armies that you can rely on to just like push relentlessly and maybe even come out the end despite the numbers deficiency with a pretty solid victory. So yeah, really cool to see it played this way. Personally, I've been playing them more with like large amounts of Teleri because I like having more options and I like having more troops on the field. But it's good to see that this is also a viable alternative to that for sure. Looks like this over here, it's over. Yeah, it's really bloody conflict as well. Not much left of Nogrod. I think it's literally just their warlords, like 30 models left. And maybe less than 100 models for Panthan as well. It's really his elites. His heavily armored multiple HP elites were the only things that were able to kind of come through here and just weather the grinding, relentless pressure that Belegost can put on you. And go ahead and fast forward it down to the end there. Yeah, really nicely done. Gervais did kind of struggle a little bit against the Avari on his end, but at the end of the day, he managed to kill the majority of that army. Like, maybe they had like 200, 250 or so dwarves still remaining. Yeah, very, very impressive indeed. Let's take a look at some of the casualties here. I want to see what the Knights of Tyrion got. It's a little bit less than what I thought. Obviously, we missed something huge with the Ember Weavers. They managed to kill like 200 or so dwarves. So I don't know what we missed with them, but obviously it was significant. Depth's tool costs getting 148, which doesn't seem like a ton, but also it's a 30-something man unit, so consider that in calculations as well. Knights of Tyrion did a lot, but again, less than I thought. But still, it's like a 25, 28 man unit, killing like 3 to 4 times its numbers, so still pretty impressive. Hearthguard, though, damn, 177, 185, and 78. Sort of seems to be the curse that, like, when you bring 3 of something, one of them will perform badly, while the other 2 will do pretty well. I've never actually seen the Hearthguard get those kinds of numbers before, and especially not against heavily armored factions. They are a little bit lower on the damage side of things, only having those one-handed swords, so that's a little bit of an eye-opener for sure. Swanguard doing what they do best, basically just dying for the cause. Mariners did not too bad. And the Sentinels, wow, 300, 236 kills. That at least makes a lot of sense. And then some sentries there about Holande as well. That's just the bowmen. It's unsurprising that they did nothing. or next to nothing. But it's always nice to have a little support bowman as well. So I wouldn't say it was a waste to bring them. In any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys will join me for the next video, which is probably going to be in maybe a day or two, depending on how much work I actually get done today. But yeah, as I said at the beginning of the video, I have replenished my supply of replays, so I've got a ton, and actually a lot of siege battles. I don't think I've ever seen this many sieges come out of Silmarillion before in my life. And then, of course, there's the Halloween stuff that will hopefully be coming out pretty quick as well. So, yeah, in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you later.